Hey guys, pretty excited about doing this review finally. It's been a long time coming for a couple different reasons. One is just that it's taken me forever to actually find one to buy. These things are extremely scarce, really hard to find, and the other reason it's been a long time coming is that, over the past few months I've been doing a lot of research about these things, reading everything that I can, and I've come to the conclusion that there's just really no reliable first-hand information out there about these online. And because of that, I've just been really taking my time, getting my facts together, sorting everything out, and making sure that I can do a really thorough, detailed, accurate YouTube review video, because it's really going to be about the only thorough source of information I think about these guns online. So because of that, I'm really excited to finally be doing it, and I'm really proud to finally have one. I'm just looking forward to sharing it with you guys because it's a pretty cool little piece of firearms engineering, and it's just a kind of a cool little gun. So I apologize in advance if this ends up being a long review. There is a lot to cover, and I'll try to zip through it as much as I can, but just if it goes a bit long, sorry. So anyway, let's get started on it. So obviously the gun in question is a Dardick Corporation Model 1500 handgun. Looking at the outside of the box right now, so let me just open that up, let you take a look. Ta-da. It's probably about the ugliest unicorn you'll ever see. Never fails to make ugliest gun lists and can't believe this gun exists lists and stuff like that. So I'll just let you sort of soak up the weirdness for a minute while I tell you a little bit about the history of this thing. It was conceived in 1949. David Dardick was the inventor. He was born in 1911, incidentally. But he and Melvin Johnson of Johnson rifle fame, if you've ever heard of the 1941 Johnson rifle, it's kind of another odd duck. So I think it's funny that these two sort of peas in a pod got together on this weird creation. Anyway, throughout the 50s they worked on this design. 1954 they applied for the patent, and in the late 50s they got 3 different patents. I haven't really been able to figure out which one's which. The wording in each of them is a little different, so I don't know what was going on there. But there were a few different patents issued for this gun. Production finally started in 1959, and production sadly ended in 1960. It lasted barely over a year. Company went under. There was no sales whatsoever. They only ended up making about 40 to 50 of these things over the course of that year. So that's why they're extremely hard to find, is just that, there were barely any made to begin with, and now we're 50 years out, and who knows how many still exist. So closed up shop in 1960. 1962, fortunately for me, the rest of the inventory and the stock at the factory was bought by Numrich Gun Parts Corporation, which is lucky because I don't really have to worry about things breaking on this, because Numrich is still sitting on a mountain of parts, and if something, I've already ordered several parts from them actually when I was repairing the gun. So there were a few different models made. This one is the Model 1500, and it came with a 6-inch 38 caliber barrel and a 22 caliber barrel. And I kind of hesitated before after I said 38, because I was about to say 38 special, but this is really another trick about this gun, are the rounds it shoots. Are these weird things called trounds. That stands for triangle plus round is a tround. And it's a special cartridge. It's not, I'll get into it in a little bit and talk about it more, but it's not a 38 special in there. It's got a 38 caliber projectile, but the rest of it, there's no brass case or anything like that. So the gun itself is actually a magazine-fed revolver. There's a magazine in the handle here, or in the grip, and then there's a revolving cylinder up here with 3 chambers. And it's an open chamber design. I'll get into that too in a minute when I talk about the tround system a little bit more. But the Model 1500 was the main one that sold. There was also a Model 1100, which I think is actually even more rare than these, because of the few I've seen for sale, they've all been 1500s. The Model 1100 had a shorter grip. It only held 11 rounds. The 1100 stands for 11 rounds, 1500 for 15 rounds, and it came with a 3-inch barrel instead of the 6-inch. And I don't think it came with a 22 barrel at all. In the box, you got a box of trounds. Came with 20 in a box, and supposedly you also got 20 22 adapters to be able to shoot 22 rimfire using a caliber selector that's up here. And I'll talk about all this stuff later too. And then also I'm sure it came with some paperwork, which this one didn't, but I did order some reproductions online, so I'll just sort of show you what was on those. I'll let you see what the 1100 looked like. You can see that the grip is shorter, the barrel's shorter versus the 1500. And this is sort of a little preview of what's going on inside the gun. You can see the 3-chamber cylinder, and then the magazine and the grip, and the way it feeds up in there. And I'll go over that in a little bit too. See, I'll let you look at the specifications if you want to pause the video and be able to read that. Just Tells you about some of the different models. And what's kind of cool about it is there was a rifle conversion kit available. It was like a carbine kit that you could put on there. It was in .22 caliber. And kind of kicking myself, a couple years ago I saw one of these for sale on Gunbroker for, ended up going for 130 bucks. I stopped bidding on it, which I kind of regret because I knew I was going to get a Dardick eventually, but just didn't really feel like spending that money at the time, and they're pretty much impossible to find. There's a picture of the .22 caliber adapter that supposedly came with the 1500. There was a stripper clip available, and that one went with, I believe, the Model 2000, which was a prototype, which you can see here. This is a manual that I got. I think it's like a pamphlet sort of, or a brochure. There's the Model 2000, and it held 20 rounds, and it was fed on both sides of the gun rather than just one. And here there's also a picture of the inventor, David Dardick, showing the gun to Melvin Johnson, the inventor of the Johnson rifle. So anyway, that's just some of the literature that was out at the time. One of the more interesting features of the gun is the ammo. So I'll talk about that for a little bit, because this is one of the things that, you know, people actually tend to have experience with because they're not too hard to find. So I'll talk about these trounds and the whole open chamber system. So the real foundation of this gun, and its reason for being basically, is the open chamber system and the trounds that Dardick came up with, the ammo that went with it. And it's really kind of an interesting idea. David noticed that in high rate of fire machine guns especially, you're having a bolt going back and forth over and over and over again. And what happens is it wears parts out. You have to wait for the bolt to return to battery before you can fire the next round off. And David realized that by having a chamber with one wall open that you could feed rounds into laterally, using that lateral motion is a lot easier on the gun itself, and you can have a higher theoretical rate of fire because you're not waiting for that bolt to return to battery all the time. You know, as fast as that cylinder can spin, that's how fast you can send rounds out the barrel. So to do that, he came up with this tround system, which these are the trounds themselves. What they would do is they would feed into this open chamber, and it was supported on all sides when it was actually in battery, because there's an open wall when it's being loaded, and then when it's in place, the top strap of the gun actually forms the third chamber wall. And this design was chosen, this triangle shape was chosen because it allows for it to load consistently into the chamber. They're easily stackable also. Another benefit of the tround system besides the high rate of fire was that magazine capacity was supposedly increased. And David really promoted these heavily to police departments at the time, using that, especially the high magazine capacity, because back then highest magazine capacity you had was a Browning high power, and these Dardicks could hold 15 trounds. There was a prototype Model 2000 that would hold 20, so that was another benefit besides just the fast action of the lateral movement and all of that. Eventually he wanted these to end up in the military as high rate of fire machine guns. And later on, you know, these are in .38 caliber, but he did keep working with that, and I've seen videos of high rate of fire machine guns, and it seems to work great in that application. And they were in .50 caliber. There was all sorts of calibers in these for these things. So these handguns, though, they came in .38, and there's a real common misconception about these, that it's a .38 special crammed into a plastic sleeve. And believe me, I wish that were the case, but it's not, because then I could actually reload these pretty easily. What it is, though, is a nylon, it's called Fortiflex, plastic sleeve, and into that is they push a .38 caliber bullet, just lead, and then there's a plastic disc behind that, amount of powder, primer pocket, and then the primer. There were a lot of adapters made too. There was a .22 caliber adapter that was factory, and after Numrich bought the inventory, they experimented with a 9mm adapter and a .38 special wad cutter adapter, maybe a few others, but they weren't having good results with it, and they were worried about hurting the gun. So those are extremely hard to find. So are the .22 adapters. I actually ended up making a CAD file using the basic dimensions of a regular tround, only with a .22 caliber hole in the middle of it. So fortunately, I'll tell you this tale of woe in a little bit, but couldn't get the caliber conversion to work. But it is basically the same principle. There's a caliber switch, and you could make it hit the rim instead of the center, and then you could shoot .22s all day. They originally made these out of brass and aluminum, but they decided that the Fortiflex nylon was better because it would actually deform a little bit in the chamber. It would move forward towards the barrel, mouth of the barrel a little bit, and keep pressure all contained within it. The brass and the aluminum didn't really deform enough, and I think they lost a lot of pressure and velocity that way. So the ballistics on these were similar to .38 special, so I guess that wasn't really a hindrance. The ammo wasn't even supposedly that expensive back in the day, so, you know, unlike the Gyrojet, which is another gun I've reviewed recently, this didn't really spell the doom of the Dardick. It's hard to find, yeah, or it was hard to find back in the day, but it wasn't ridiculously expensive, and I think if it had taken off, these things wouldn't be hard to manufacture or anything. So just kind of a weird little component to the whole open chamber system. So yeah, let's talk now about the actual gun itself. I'll get into the size of it, ergonomics, and all that stuff. Before I get into the size comparison, I'm just going to talk about the main thing that's probably on your mind is why is this thing so ugly? And honestly, I wish I knew. I don't know why David Dardick designed it this way. The Model 2000 was the prototype, and apparently this is actually a refinement of that. Model 2000 had kind of a funkier shaped grip and looked a little different, but it basically looked the same. And I have no idea why this barrel is so skinny. It seems like it wouldn't have been hard to just sort of make the barrel look a little bit more normal, make it look more like a traditional gun. But this is the design Dardick went with, and I don't know, I guess I'm glad that he did. It's part of the reason I like it is because it's so weird looking, but I don't know why it needs to look like this. As far as the construction of the gun goes, it's basically a stamped aluminum frame made out of a Alcoa brand aluminum, painted black, which I believe chips off pretty easily, so I'll try to be careful with that. The barrel is actually a blued steel, and it's not too bad in terms of finish and build quality and everything. The interior also seems to be made out of decent steel. The grips are just a plastic that's been glued on. The frame, you can see the Allen head screws that hold it all together, so not super high build quality. I'll get into that a little bit later when I talk about some of the criticisms, but I'll let you look at the side too. This over here is the ejection port. Talk about that too. And then as far as size goes, I'll pull out my Beretta like I always do to do size comparisons. I was really surprised actually at how large the gun is, which you should be able to tell here comparing it to a large gun like the Beretta. This is bigger than the Beretta. The grip especially is larger. I'll let you see what it looks like on top so you can get an idea of just how much bigger it is. See, it's got at least a couple inches down there at the grip. The barrel is a little bit longer, but of course it kind of looks a little smaller up here just because it's lighter. It doesn't have all this barrel mass, but it is definitely a big gun. I'll show you the width too. Apart from being just large in general, it's also wide compared to the Beretta. You can see there especially, it just feels like it sort of dwarfs the Beretta. See how giant that is? And it's kind of funny how Dardick promoted how it holds so many rounds and everything, but yeah, what do you think? It's got a gigantic grip like that. I'd hope it holds a lot of rounds, so I'll let you look at this too. Both of these are unloaded, of course. So, large gun. There was a couple other barrel sizes you could buy. Obviously the 1100 came with a 3-inch barrel. And fortunately Numerich still has a decent supply of 4-inch barrels, so I picked one of those up too. Trying to figure out which one looks weirder when I put it on the gun. I think they both look pretty strange, so there are different sizes to the gun. Also the Model 1100 obviously had a shorter grip because it only held 11 rounds. And so I guess it would have been a little bit smaller, a little bit more concealable. So let's look at the top two. Another thing is that it's interesting about the appearance is that it's really asymmetrical. That was one of the first things I noticed too when I picked it up. Apart from just being really like sort of bulbous and everything right there, is that this bulges out more than over here, which is a little bit unusual for a handgun. And that's because you're loading it in through here. But I'll get into all that in the next segment about ergonomics and features and everything. So as far as the ergonomics go, they're basically just as wonky as you think they'd be, especially the hand feel. And that's mostly because, as I've mentioned, all the weight is kept within this mass here, and it's not all that heavy, 35 ounces, but what's weird about it is that there's no weight out here. So when you're holding it, it just feels really oddly balanced. It's almost like I've described it as sort of like pistol gripping a snow globe. This grip is pretty wide. It's just large in general, but it also has a pretty big circumference. So it really fills up your hand, and then you just have this sort of bowl sitting on top of you because it's so round and bulbous looking. That, you know, if you can just imagine grabbing a snow globe and sort of cupping it like that and you're trying to pull the trigger, that's sort of what it feels like. It has a really weird feel in the hand because of that. It's just no weight up here. It's just very untraditional. Apart from just all the height, you know, and the bigness of it all. You know, it actually points surprisingly well though. I'll give it that. If that's a sight that keeps falling down, which I'll talk about. But you know, you pull it up, it actually points decently. You bring it up and the sights are about where you want them to be. The grip itself isn't actually all that uncomfortable. Another sort of weird thing about contributing to the snow globe effect is that there's no like beaver tail or tang or anything. So it really just sort of feels like it's just sort of floating up above your hand somehow. So it's a bit strange for that. I'll talk a little bit about some of the features on the gun. Start here with the main one, which would be the magazine loading hatch. It's this door right here. There's a button right here. You push that down, and then that springs open. You load in your trounds. Here you can see the open chamber inside the gun. Tround slips in there. This is a magazine follower. When you're loading, push this down. There's a little finger here that can open when the door is open. See if the light catches that. And that keeps the magazine follower down and keeps the trounds down. I'll show you that in a little bit when I show you how it loads. And then when you close the door, that thing shoots up. That's the inside. There's a trigger, grips. Close that up. There's actually a hammer on here. I was surprised about that. I didn't realize that it was a single action, double action. So you can cock it. It actually feels kind of nice with these little serrations and everything. The sights, rear sight is really stupid and annoying. It's always falling down. I don't know if it's supposed to be that way or if it's just because it's old and loose, but it does that. Every time you pull the trigger, it'll fall down. And I imagine every time you shoot it too. This right here is a caliber selector switch, which I'll talk to you about that in a minute too. The point of that is that there's two settings. There's rimfire and centerfire, and by sticking a screw in there, you turn it all the way around, and you can switch between rimfire and centerfire. There's the ejection port, which the cylinder's a little bit misaligned, but so after you shoot a tround, it kind of poops out of this side. There's actually an extractor here too, so it does sort of fling it out a little bit. There's the front sight, and on the front here is another screw, and you use that to change the barrels. So that's kind of interesting too. I'll just do that for you right now even. Because there's different barrel lengths, you know. And you can also change it out for the 22 barrel. So basically you just loosen that screw, pull the barrel out, and I'll show you how it actually works. You can see there's sort of like a half moon divot right in there. Sorry about the focus on this. This camera doesn't do autofocus. And then when you put the barrel in, turn it like that. And what it does is it locks into these grooves that are carved into the side of the barrel. See, like that. They all have them. So you just put this into the right distance, and when you turn that screw, it locks the barrel in. Which unfortunately, it doesn't really provide a very secure lock, in my opinion. So, like when it's in there, it feels a little bit like it could wobble loose or something. And I'm sure that affects the sight picture and everything. That the sight might cant a little bit sometimes. It's not a very reliable way of doing it, really. It's an interesting try by Dardick, but it's not really probably the best design. So yeah, I think that's basically all the features. There's no real safety or anything. So that's pretty much everything on the external and controls section of the gun. I've actually shot this gun twice, so I can't really say that I'm an authority on how it shoots, but I can give you my impressions on what happened those two times. First time I shot it was with an old tround from the 50s, and it burst, unfortunately. I kind of expected that to happen because it is made out of, the case is a plastic, and I just figured it might be kind of brittle, and it turns out it was. It broke at one of these corners here. It actually worked fine though. The bullet exited just fine. It was a bit hard to extract afterwards because the case had torn, so it didn't really fit through the ejection port, so that was a bit of a pain to get it out. But I was actually kind of surprised. It's a bit disappointed too because I'm sitting on a mountain of trounds here, and I was thinking that I would be able to shoot them for a video, but I don't know, it might just end up being either I don't shoot them at all because they're just going to break, or if I do, it's just going to be single shot every time and I'll have to stop and yank it out. So that was a bit disappointing. My other experiment with shooting it was with my tround adapter, my 38 special adapter, and you can sort of see the aftermath of that. Obviously it's not good. What I did was I had another adapter made. You've already seen my 22 adapter, and I made one for 38 special wad cutter. And the way that works is I just had it printed at shapeways just like the 22, and just get a 38 special wad cutter cartridge, stick it in there, and it's the exact same dimensions as a regular tround. So it functioned fine. It's just that it blew up, unfortunately. You know, it fit and it cycled and everything. The bullet exited. It lost a lot of pressure though because it broke. And the bullet itself was actually hanging halfway out of the phone book I shot into. It's probably going at about 200 feet per second max, so it lost a lot of velocity. You know, the original tround, it actually kept all its velocity. It seemed like it went pretty deep into the phone books. So sad to say this didn't work either. I'm going to try it again with some different materials. It might withstand the pressure. These are real weak rounds too, so I'm not too concerned about the gun. Gun held up fine and everything, and so I'm not really too worried about that. But I'll tell you a little bit about my tale of misery with this 22 adapter. I was really excited when I found the gun because it has this caliber selector switch on it, and it actually came with the 22 barrel, which is really hard to find. Like I mentioned, you turn this over and you can shoot 22s out of it. So I thought, well, I got the barrel, and I'll just have these adapters made, and I can shoot low pressure 22 rounds cheaply all day long and not worry about blowing the gun up, blowing my hand up, anything like that. Fortunately, it wasn't meant to be, because the critical part was missing from here. And it's actually, I'm not sure what happened with this gun. I think that basically if there were only 40 to 50 of these made, they were always in a sort of a prototype stage or something. And this one somehow left the factory without the ability to shoot the 22 rounds. What happens is, this screw, I was turning it and it wasn't doing anything whatsoever. So I pulled it out and I figured out what the problem was. I was missing some parts, so I ordered them from Numrich. Like I said, that's pretty handy. And the way it's supposed to work is, there's this screw here, the caliber changing screw. You can see the CF and the RF on there a little bit. It's supposed to have this sort of funnel. And if you can imagine it being in the gun there, the way it would work is, you turn the screw, it goes in here like this, turn the screw and it moves this funnel up and down. What that does is it redirects the firing pin to hit either the center or the rim of the cartridge. On mine though, there's only a single channel in the back of the gun for that firing pin to go through. So no matter what I do, even if I put these parts on and I moved it down to the rimfire position, that firing pin would just slam into the back of the gun. And I don't know how it got out of the factory with only that one hole. This was a feature that they really advertised heavily. It's in every pamphlet and brochure I found, is that it can shoot 22s easily. And so it was really disappointing to me that I'm not going to be able to shoot 22s out of there unless I were to drill an extra hole or something. And I think the way it's supposed to work is that in the back here is like a slot. And so the firing pin can go in either the center position or the lower position. But either way, I can't shoot the 22s, sadly. And I showed it earlier, but you can sort of see I did put it through there once, and you can see that the firing pin was still striking right in the middle of it. So that was pretty sad, pretty annoying, but it is what it is. I'm going to keep pursuing the whole 38 special wad cutter adapter because I think it'll work if I can just find a good material for it. So, but an interesting part of this gun is actually the loading, which I have had a lot of experience with, so I'll show you how that works now. So before I show you the loading procedure on this, I'll show you the trigger pull just because it's kind of finicky once it's loaded, and I want to make sure that the trigger is working for you. You can see it. So the trigger pull is actually not nearly as bad as I thought it was going to be. It's kind of long and double action, and it's a little bit heavy, but it's not as heavy as I thought actually. It does sort of get stuck sometimes, and I got to help it get stuck back there. And then single action, it's actually somewhat crisp. There's a little bit of travel there. Once you get to there, it breaks pretty cleanly. It's heavy also. Single action's probably 6 or 7 pounds or something. And then double action's a good 12 pounds, I bet. It's pretty heavy, but it's actually really smooth. You can kind of see the cylinder flying around in there too. What it would be doing right now is scooping a round off and then putting it up there, hammer drops, and next time you pull the trigger, round comes out that side. You can see sort of it'd be throwing rounds out right there. So, and I'll actually show you what it's like to load this. It's really quite a pain. You can see there's the magazine follower. And I've taken the barrel off, if you're wondering, because when I fire these dummy trounds, I insert the trounds backwards and I call them dummy trounds. I found that if there's a barrel here, the hammer strikes it, it goes forward and it gets bound up a little bit against the barrel, and then it's hard to extract because this rotating cylinder, it doesn't clear through this port, and the rotating cylinder gets jammed up and everything. So it's just easier if I have the barrel off. I can just tap the tround back in. Anyway, I'll show you what it's like to load it. So you take a tround, backwards of course, you push it in here, and then you push it down, and that finger I showed you earlier holds the trounds down, so you can keep loading more on top of it. So I'll get another one, primer up front, push it down, and sometimes it pops out. This loading procedure is really tedious and annoying, which is definitely one of the shortcomings of the gun. And I always have to make sure that this finger is going to keep it down. Another one, bullet first. So you push it down in there. This is where the stripper clip that was advertised with the Model 2000 would really come in handy, because theoretically you could just, you could load up a sort of a clip, stick it here, and then just push them all down at once. Probably just didn't actually work that well, much like the gun, but it's a good idea anyway. And the Model 2000 also, you could load on both sides. It had a loading gate right here too, and I'm sure that never made it to production because it's even more finicky trying to load, having the cylinder pick up trounds off of this side of the magazine and then moving on to the next one. I'm sure it was pretty finicky. So I got several trounds loaded up in there. What happens is when you close this gate, that finger, it gets pushed back up against the inside wall of the magazine well, and then these trounds will shoot up into the open chamber. And you'll maybe see it, you'll at least hear it when I close the gate. You can kind of see that tround shoot up in there. So what I'm going to do now is pull the trigger. You can see sort of how that works. And hopefully these trounds are all in spec. That's another thing I've come across, is that a lot of them actually don't really cycle very cleanly because they're a little bit too long or too wide or whatever. So I'll even show you too what happens with this sight when you pull the trigger. It'll fall down. So pull the trigger, see that tround's coming up, and it just shot one. And then let's just make sure it's still seated back in there, but it'll extract properly, and then it poops it out. Now let's see, as long as I can keep it backwards, you know, and as long as these things don't deform, I think they come out all right. And then what happens too, which is annoying, is that the last couple trounds, there'll probably be 2 in here. Yeah, the last 2 always seem to get jammed up for some reason. And this is one of the mechanical problems I alluded to earlier, was, I'll talk about it in a minute, but these last 2, you can see the tround sort of in position, ready to go up. And see, this is sort of how you can reload it while you're firing, is you can have this open, pull the trigger. Let me put this back in here so it's clear. What it does is it slips past this bar back here that's supposed to hold the follower back. So let me put this in. So like, imagine you're in a firefight and you're shooting a bad guy or whatever, and you're out of ammo. You can just flip this hatch open and put another tround in real fast, and you're good to go. So you see how that works? Might be easier to just do it this way. So I don't have to deal with the loading, with it stripping rounds off the top of the magazine. So that's the point of this gun, is that with that open chamber design, it's feeding rounds off of the top of a magazine. It scoops them off, fires them, and then ejects the previous one, all in the same trigger pull. You can kind of see what's going on there too. And like I said, every once in a while when I pull this trigger, it just doesn't go, and that's kind of annoying. Overall, as far as the reliability of this, every once in a while I'll get it to actually cycle a full magazine of these dummy trounds, and it'll work about 80% of the time, but sometimes it just is real finicky. And of course on camera it was like that. So let me just put this barrel in so you can kind of see what it looks like to fire with the barrel in. So that's sort of shooting impressions and the trigger feel and all that. I will talk about criticisms next. So since this video is already embarrassingly long, and I do apologize about that, it's just that there's so much to go over, and I wanted it to be detailed and thorough, and believe it or not, I've reshot several of these segments multiple times, and this is as short as I've been able to get it, so I appreciate you sticking with me. But I'm going to condense my usual criticisms and conclusion segments into just one shortened section. So as far as criticisms go, if you've been paying attention throughout this video, you'll see that there's a lot of things wrong with the gun. The concept wasn't terrible, you know, the open chamber system and the trounds, it seems like it could work, and I've seen videos, you know, of the machine gun firing, and it seems to work okay, but this execution of it was not good. It's pretty unreliable, it's really finicky. When it came out, it was priced $25 higher than a Colt Python. These were selling for $100. You could walk into a store, buy a Colt Python for $75, which was a hand-fitted, high-quality target revolver that always worked. This thing was finicky, it wasn't of the highest build quality. You know, the barrel feels like it's decently made, the insides feel like they're okay, but overall it just doesn't have a good solid feel about it. You have to shoot these weird rounds, the trounds, which you couldn't just walk into any gun store and buy. There were a lot of things like that that kind of stacked the deck against it. Also on the factory side of things, there were apparently clashing egos, there were too many chefs in the kitchen, sort of, you know, and they could never streamline production to make things efficient. There are a lot of quality control issues, like, you know, I've talked at length about how mine doesn't even, the caliber selector screw doesn't do anything. And it's just, I don't even understand how the gun made it out of the factory in that condition, but So there's just a lot of things wrong with these guns. And back to the build quality, I've seen 4 of these for sale over the past couple of years, and these guns typically were not shot a whole lot, I would imagine. And of those 4, 2 were significantly broken, including this one. It was all the parts on the inside were scraping. I actually had to file parts down on the frame shell to get the trigger parts to move. The trigger was frozen. So I got a good deal on the gun, fortunately, and I was able to fix it, but you know, they're not reliable. They break easily. So there's a lot of things wrong with the gun. The way the barrel screws in, it's kind of loose. The rear sight's floppy. Anyway, there's just a lot of criticisms, really. And nowadays, you know, going into my conclusion section, I'm just really proud to have it because they're so weird and so rare. I mentioned at the top of the video that this is basically sitting at the top of the bizarre guns totem pole, sort of. And especially for me, I have what I call my unholy trinity of weird guns, and I finally completed that trinity with this one. You know, it's the Mateba MTR-8, the Gyrojet, and then finally this Dardick Model 1500. It's just so weird in so many ways. I really appreciate that David Dardick, what he was trying to do. I think the tround idea isn't a bad idea, and I really appreciate that he was trying to do something new and novel. It's a shame it never worked out, never caught on to any extent, but I just love that sort of stuff. He was really thinking outside the box. He had to engineer a whole different kind of ammo. The whole magazine-fed revolver, the open chamber system was all new. So, you know, I think it's just pretty cool that he even tried to do it and was able to do anything with it. Even though only 40 to 50 of these were ever made, who knows how many exist. I just think it's still a cool idea. So, you know, that's the Dardick Model 1500. If you ever find any more information about these, please send it to me. I'd always love to learn more. As far as I know, I've pretty much found everything that there is to find online about them. So, hope this video was educational. I really appreciate you guys sticking through the whole thing. Keep a lookout on my channel. I'm going to eventually do a shooting video, whether I get the adapter situation figured out or if I end up just having to shoot some of these old trounds and having them break on me and making this a single shot gun. Whatever it takes, I'm going to fire this thing on camera. So stick around for that. I'm going to also try to make a shortened version of this review. It's going to be tough. Like I mentioned, I've already reshot several of these segments trying to get it shortened down a bit, and I know not everybody wants to watch a 40-minute review of a gun that they're probably never going to actually even see in person. So really appreciate it if you stuck around with me this long, and so yeah, thanks for watching. This is a review of the Dardick Model 1500.